Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Cris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Good morning and welcome to First Things First. I'm Ebony K. Williams. That's Hall of Famer Cris Carter. Doug Gottlieb.
You guys look nice today.
Thank you. I was saying
I like the blue
coordinating.
and green.
Are you searching for a compliment? Because you always look nice.
No. I was saying you guys look nice.
I appreciate
Christine makes me look nice all the time.
Well, what we did here was we coordinated. Christine got the color palette, the olive green, this, you got monochromatic blue here.
Blue steel.
And a little Kelly blue. I like it. All right, so we're going to start with the Warriors. Despite 50 points from Kevin Durant, Golden State, well, they still lost 123 to 117 against the Blazers. Now the Warriors enter the break at 44-14, which looks good for almost any other team, but they're already one loss away from the most losses in an entire season under Steve Kerr. So, Cris Carter, is it true that Golden State is really more vulnerable than we thought?
I think we've had a lot of conversations about who Golden State is, and we can't overreact to this because look what they've been through the last 4 years. And it's basically unprecedented as far as the 4 finals in a row. And teams that do that, they are going to have struggles. They're going through, we just thought it was the normal dog days of January in the NBA. But now, given what's going on in Houston and what they have there, right now, they have the home court advantage, which if you looked before the season, said, man, right at the All-Star break, Houston's going to have home court advantage. You'd be like, wow, that would be very surprising. Because some people thought that this Golden State team in the second year with Durant might be better than they were last year. Now, that might prove out to be true. But right now, as we stand, of course you have to be worried, are they vulnerable? Not only on the court play, but look at the technical fouls. Draymond Green, Kevin Durant. 1 and 2 in the NBA. Russell Westbrook's right there with them as far as technical fouls. Potentially facing a suspension. Steve Kerr, he warned us. Hey, guys, man, this team is not locked in. So I got the players trying to coach them up because I think that they need to hear another voice. Well, maybe we need to go back and listen to the coach because the coach had it right. So, yes, at this point at All-Star break, yes, they are vulnerable. But they're also the most talented. Last night's game was a game about not making shots. Clay couldn't make a shot. Steph couldn't make a shot. KD basically, he carried everything on his own. But when you face hot teams in the West, that's what makes the playoffs for me so dangerous, that the West has so much depth that you can get into some tough series in round 1 and round 2.
The last point, you made a lot of good points. The last one was the best one because I think the fear you have, your Golden State, last year took them 12 games, the minimum, 12 games to get to the finals, so they were fresh as a daisy. You look at the year before, that's when Steph got hurt. They struggled a little bit with teams like Portland, and, of course, they end up falling in Game 7. And if you remember, they looked exhausted. Steph looked exhausted. So the first thing is that they're still the favorite, and they're still likely to get to the finals, but the journey to get to the finals is going to be more arduous than it was in the past. And what's the reasoning? I don't think it's the big 3. I think it's everything else.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's everything else. Zaza Pachulia has not been Andrew Bogut. Now, Bogut statistically didn't do much, but he was a great screener, a great passer, a great teammate, and a better rim protector than Pachulia. So with your starting lineup, you're playing 4-on-5, right? I mean, we see him, we're like, man, he stinks. Yeah. How is he out there?
We'll give him a little benefit of doubt. We'll say 5-on-4.5.
Fair enough, okay? But I think the other missing part of the discussion is their finishing kick, their death lineup, if you will, has had Andre Iguodala. Andre Iguodala had as many points as you, me combined, and he played 28 minutes in an NBA game. Andre Iguodala used to average 20 in this league. You got to try to not score a point in 28 minutes.
And in a situation where they needed the scoring. So it's not only what the stat sheet says, but when you watch the game, I mean, they needed a bucket, and typically Iggy would be able to get them that or make some type of defensive play to get them to burst, and we're not seeing that out of him.
Okay, and so a little bit of kind of what I'm saying. Now, Pat McCaw's out, and I know he hasn't been great this year, but he was kind of that next generation hybrid guard who only in his second year, but I think eventually will be a very good bench producer for him. You have their 3 older players coming off the bench, led by Iguodala and Sean Livingston, that appear, and David West, that kind of like the Miami Heat ran into. Like at some point, Father Time does catch up to you. So yes, I think they're vulnerable, not just to more losses, but that bench scoring or lack of bench punch is more important with this team because the truth is that one of their bench players is really one of their death lineup players at the end of games. And it wouldn't stun me if they go sign somebody on the buyout market because they know that they're missing one additional piece.
Okay, so you're both doing fantastic work kind of laying out all these explanations as to why their record looks like it looks going into All-Star break. My question is this. Cris Carter, you say they are still the most talented despite this record. Are they getting worse this season? Are they regressing? Or are all the teams around them that they're going up against now just that much better than they were last year?
Well, that's a good question. The teams around them are better. The West is stronger. Houston is a better team.
Yep.
And we don't know what Cleveland is going to be, but let's just assume that they'll be better than the team that made it to the finals because they're a little more athletic. They have more depth.
Oklahoma City,
especially in the first or second round. Like we saw last night, it's hard to win on the road in the NBA. So if you lose a couple games on the road, you're in a 6-7 game series. So, yes, I do believe that also the Warriors have been fortunate. Teams have been injured when they faced them. So their walk to the finals has been easier, and the West is stronger to answer your question.
You know, the thing I find fascinating, I don't actually think this is some super talented team. I think, look, Klay Thompson is great. Obviously, Steph Curry's won 2 MVPs, and Kevin Durant, I believe, is currently the best or the co-best player in the NBA, along with LeBron James. But what they've always done is they've always fit together perfectly. Like Draymond Green's an all-star, but he's not one of the top 15 players.
No, he's a glue guy.
He's the perfect fit for what they have. But unless they have that perfect bench, and their defense isn't as good. Their bench used to shut you down, shut off your water. You know, there's only a handful of teams that have allowed this many 120-plus point games this year. Check this out. Bulls stink. Cavs, worst defense in the league outside of the Kings. The Nuggets, the Pelicans, the Suns, who are just awful. The Lakers, the Magic, the Nets, and the Warriors. We're also talking around the fact that they're not as bought in defensively as they've been. So, look, I think they've always been pieces that have fit together. They tried Nick Young. That doesn't seem to work. The Jaja thing has never been what they had with Andrew Bogut. And I do think that those older pieces coming off the bench, maybe they can find the fountain of youth in the playoffs, or maybe they need one more guy. But I do think this team is vulnerable.
The fountain of youth, it becomes very important. Now, because of where they are they vulnerable? Yes. But what do they do the last 20 games? Because we've seen them out with a commanding lead. Man, Iggy and them have been able to rest. They've been able to rotate players. He's been able to do like Popovich's been able to do because they've had that cushion. Now when you don't have that cushion, they keep sliding. Houston secures the number 1, and then you're looking at even tougher matchups in round 1 and round 2, the veteran players that haven't been rested like they typically have been the last several years.
Okay, so I hear a theme. I hear Steve Kerr talking about he's needing to do something to engage them, hence letting people call plays that are, on the court there. I hear you, Doug, talking about them not being checked in defensively as they once were. We know that familiarity breeds complacency.
Yeah.
Is this a complacent Golden State Warrior team?
I don't think so. I think that they are a team that has accomplished a lot. I think that all the other teams that we have seen, we need to give Golden State the benefit of the doubt to let them have their struggle. I mean, they've played 100-game seasons 3 years in a row based on having the playoffs and based on the excellence for which they performed under. Not only just for what the record was, man, they're like the Beatles traveling around now. I mean, the pressure that they're under is a different type of pressure. So I do believe that they will get engaged defensively as they get these 24 last games, but also they need a break. The All-Star break is a little bit longer. That might be a chance for them to level set.
I agree with you on the All-Star break, and I think everybody, and we're going to talk about the Celtics coming up, they need the All-Star break. A lot of teams do. But it's interesting because they have 4 All-Stars, they don't necessarily get as much a break as some other teams. It actually works.
That's good.
Instead of rewarding you for an All-Star, like now you got to go out and, like, look, it's L.A. Everybody's going to be going out. Plus you have dunk contest, All-Star game, and all the corporate
press
stuff that they have to do.
All that stuff,
So there is a couple days to get away.
Again. Mention L.A. I miss L.A.
It's L.A. 75 and sunny. Although it's nice here in the city. It's beautiful.
Today is beautiful.
It's beautiful. I walked the streets last night.
Yeah,
Well, wait, we can't how you say that, Doug.
No problem. We'll transfer with you.
Okay, the point is that I don't know if the All-Star break presents the respite that this crew really needs.
No, I think that's a great point, given that they got 4 guys who aren't going to be able to unplug because they're participating in the weekend.
That's exactly right. So what should be a reward really kind of works against them. Finally, the Cavs. Well, they look pretty darn good since revamping their roster at the trade deadline, but they actually almost made a different move. According to reports, Cav ownerships did approve a deal to bring in DeAndre Jordan, but the trade hit a little snag close to the deadline. Chris Carter, are the Cavs blessed and lucky that it worked out this way, or do you think they'd be even better with Jordan?
I don't think so. I'm not in love with DeAndre Jordan, especially for the Cavs. It's not as far as his individual skill, but what would he provide to the Cavs from a fit for them to be able to beat Golden State? Because really it's about Golden State. People say, well, getting out of the East. No, that's not really the equation for LeBron. LeBron's there to try to win championships. I don't believe it makes him a champion this year, and I don't believe it helps keep him in Cleveland long term. So sometimes general managers talk about the best deals are the ones that you don't make. Yep. And I believe that Cleveland on this end benefited from whatever, if it was the first deal, second deal, whatever order they came in. I like how they are now. So I don't like to do the revisionist history part of it.
I like doing the revisionist history. You're right. General managers do say it's the ones that you don't make, oftentimes, shape your future. But look, I think for the now, Cleveland is better off of what they have. I think for the playoffs, DeAndre Jordan would have been better.
Really?
Yeah, like newsflash, DeAndre Jordan's actually making his free throws this year. He was 8 of 9 last night. I think he's making 60% on the year. And DeAndre Jordan is the best rim-protecting star.
And for a lot of people that don't watch a lot of basketball, because they went to hack DeAndre at the end of a lot of games, especially in the playoffs. So him making those free throws is a great point that you're bringing, because that was one of the huge negatives in having him to be on the court, especially late in games.
And look, I understand that we all believe that somehow the Clippers were these massive failures, that group, with Blake and Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan, but they weren't healthy. And there was something to their makeup which I think could have provided a very difficult run for the Warriors to go through in the playoffs. We never saw it. Remember, the Clippers never faced off with the Warriors in their title playoff runs. The Clippers one year beat the Spurs, and they lost because of injury, and they would never collide. Right. So I actually think the Cavs would be better in the playoffs, because in the regular season, and maybe even maybe not the playoffs, not the right word, the finals, because the depth that they have now allows, you mentioned it yesterday, LeBron James to come off the court and feel pretty good about the youth, the athleticism, the defense.
Yeah, look at the game on Monday when LeBron sat, I think, 8 minutes or so, and they were able to be consistent, only a couple points behind.
But championships are won by your best 5 on the court. Sure. And if the Cavs' best 5 would have been better if you had DeAndre Jordan at center, in my opinion. The problem was you couldn't jettison Tristan Thompson. You'd still have Kevin Love. But you put him protecting that rim, rolling to that rim, guarding off the paint. We all talk about the Warriors' three-point shooting, which is great, but the Warriors lead the league in layups. They get dead layups.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you start looking at a series and how you're going to win 4 games, yes, you could, if you add DeAndre, because Tristan is not the defender that he was a couple years ago. You make a great point, because they do. And we don't look at it that way. Man, they shoot threes, they're up and down, but they also, they lead the league in layups and easy buckets. So having that massive defender there, that could be a difference changer. That could be a game changer for them.
Absolutely. So we're now going to move on to a big battle between 2 small little point guards. 2 former Celtics, Isaiah Thomas and Rondo. Well, they were ejected in the first quarter of last night's game. The 2 exchanged words, and they were quite snippy with each other multiple times before both being thrown out. Here's IT explaining what happened.
For whatever reason, he's an upset guy about me. I don't know what it is, but it's fine. Like, I can't control that. He kept bringing the tribute up when I was the one that shut the tribute down. So, I mean, I'm far past that. I'm on the Lakers trying to figure out how to help this team win. And for the things that happened today and me to get ejected is uncalled for. Nothing should have made that escalate like it did, but he already had his agenda written down. Right when I checked in the game, it was obvious.
Doug, I mean, is this just child's play? Because that's what it looks like to me. Or do you think this is a legitimate beef between these two?
This is Rajon Rondo 101, isn't it?
Yes.
Rajon Rondo is a bitter dude. Rajon Rondo is a guy
This is like fill in the blank. Rondo is instigating something with Isaiah.
Yeah,
No.
the embarrassing part is the fact that Isaiah Thomas got thrown out of the game. Like, what game are you watching? And I understand if you're an official, you're just like, hey, these two have beef, but we have no time for it. But if you go back and you watch, it was all instigated by Rajon Rondo. Like, he was trying to get under Isaiah Thomas's skin. And to Isaiah Thomas's credit, he didn't take the bait. He wasn't throwing bows, right? All he was simply trying to do was run a play, and Rondo kept instigating, and it gets them both ejected. Now, look, it should be pointed out that Rondo played spectacular basketball for the Bulls in the playoffs when they're up 2-0. And had he not gotten hurt, the Celtics might not have made a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Okay, these are all facts. And Rondo was great when he was with the Celtics, and they won a title. Yes. But this is also the problem with Rondo. This is why he's the Chucky Brown of the NBA. Chucky Brown's a great dude, but Chucky Brown played for like 13 teams. That's what Rondo's working on because he wears out his welcome. He thinks he's a tough guy. He's like Kevin Garnett without Kevin Garnett's game. Right? He just constantly wants to try and rattle the cage of the opponent, and in this particular case, he ruined the game. Now, I know the Pelicans won because it doesn't matter, but that's a bad look for the NBA and NBA officiating to eject the wrong guy.
It definitely was, but Rondo, you bring up good points. This is who Rondo is, but this is a big game for the Pelicans. Yeah. I mean, they're one game ahead of the Clippers, one game ahead of Utah as far as that last spot. So you don't want to get thrown out of a game. Now, I can understand.
Risky, yeah.
And stop being petty. Now, he was at the tribute with his boy Paul Pierce. I can understand all that. I can understand he played with the Celtics. Yeah. But now you're with the Pelicans. What's going to help the Pelicans? Now, if you instigate, and Doug, I could see you doing something like this in a game, because this is one of the old basketball tricks where you throw up your hands, so the ref's like, oh, what did I do? But when you're a taller guy going against a smaller guy, your hands are up, but you catch them elbows.
Right.
And that's what Rondo did to him a couple times. So Isaiah, the referee, catches the second guy in retaliation, but this is just one of them old gaming tricks. Yeah. You know, Isaiah didn't do anything that deserved being thrown out, and I'm just want to make sure that at this point in Isaiah's career, that I'm not one of the broadcasters just decides to continue to let the narrative just go, like it's all Isaiah's fault. Like, this guy has been through a lot. He tried to play with an injured hip. Yep. His sister passed away.
Absolutely.
Playing with that injured hip ended up getting him traded away. He's in the last year of his deal. He's never made big money, NBA money. So all that pressure, and now being on his fourth team after he thought he had a home in Cleveland. So there's a lot of other things. I thought Isaiah did only thing that he could do in this instance, and he shouldn't have been thrown out of the game.
Okay, let me make this point, because I hear both of y'all, and technically, let me say I think you're both correct. IT was not in the wrong in this particular instance. He should not have been ejected along with Rondo. But let's go back to the conversation earlier in the week about narratives, okay? You say the point, Cris Carter, I agree. You don't want to be a broadcaster continuing a particular narrative that's problematic around Isaiah Thomas. Mm-hmm. But I see it a little different. I think that he has done something to warrant some of this narrative that is continuing about him. You know what it is? He talks too much. He simply talks too much. I think when you go on Instagram and you like, you know, the shade thrown at your former teammates, you're making comments after the game, you're opening yourself up to be a target for some of this taunting and instigating that's happening to him.
First of all, I agree with you. It's a good point. And I also think that trash talk is as much part of basketball as the actual basketball itself. It is.
Sure.
Okay? It's a city game. It's a street game. It's I'm better than you, and I'm going to talk to you after I hit every shot. Or even if I miss every shot, I'm still going to talk to you.
Right.
But to Chris's point, dude's lost $100 million in the last 8 months.
Oh, it's been tough.
$100 million.
Yeah, you better get out
You would
my
be
face.
hurt too.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right? Like it's one thing. Like, we've all had bad business deals in our lifetime, to which, like, man, I should have made money and I lost money.
Yeah.
Right? But $100 million is big boy, life-changing, generational wealth.
Absolutely.
So he has that, and he did play through a bad hip. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or at the end of his career, he sues the Boston Celtics doctors for allowing him to play through that hip injury, play through that pain. gain, which has decreased his value on the open market. But in this, we can only judge in this particular instance. You're right. There are some things to which he should not have done in Cleveland. He should have kept his mouth shut. He should not have attacked Kevin Love in their players-only meeting. And oh, yeah, by the way, if it's a players-only meeting, that information also shouldn't have leaked to the media.
Sure.
If you really want to get down to it. You're right. But in this particular instance, Rondo was trying to get under his skin, and I was actually impressed by the fact that Isaiah Thomas didn't take the bait.
He restrained for a long time. But you know what? I hear you, and I have complete empathy for IT. He's, I'm sure, still grieving the loss of his sister and all the things you say. But at what point, gentlemen, do we have to stop the bleeding around the problematic narrative so we don't lose more money?
Listen, let me tell you something. Ain't nobody going to hit me to my throat. All right? Okay. Much respect to your opinion. Okay. But ain't no one... We believe in this in sports. You can hit me to my shoulders, down to my toes, but you got to stay away from the neck and stay away from the head. So Rondo hits him with a straight arm to the throat. That's what started this whole thing.
It's too much.
Then they get double technicals. And we know how to rough players up. We know how to do things, how to say things. And we can't restrict IT at 5'8". What else do you have in the NBA? If you can't talk trash in the NBA at 5'8", what the heck? How are you going to make a living?
So here's what should have happened. Okay, here's how it really works in basketball. Is somebody comes at IT. Whoever the biggest dude is on the floor, comes and cleans up Rajon Rondo.
Yes,
and he sets the screen, and the same thing Rondo does.
Charles Oakley.
Yes,
let's go.
And one of the problems with the Lakers is they got too many young dudes who don't know that that's what you're supposed to do, and too many nice dudes. Brook Lopez is the nicest dude in America, but he's also 7 feet tall, 260 pounds. He needs to come and screen and clamp, and that's how you take, just like the brushback pitch in baseball, this is how we take care of things in basketball. The officials did not let it get to that point because they didn't want it to escalate, but I think that's what is missing from the Lakers. It shouldn't be Isaiah Thomas can protect himself with his mouth, but the biggest dude on the floor has to clean that action up, and the only way to shut Rajon Rondo up is with a slightly illegal screen where you try and detach his lung. That's how you do it.
Now, IT, he does have to change the narrative. So at that point, I do agree with you. But last night, we have to look at what actually happened. Like going into the game would be like, what do we need IT to do? We need him to just play well, be a sixth man, blend in with the team, help out these young guys. Man, somebody hit you to the throat. Man, throw that out the window.
Right.
Okay, we got to play ball. I'm a grown man. He's a grown man. I'm out here getting paid. He's out here getting paid. He's trying to hurt me. I'm getting ready to defend myself.
Yeah, we're all... Back to the NBA, though. The Celtics, I'm kind of wearing some Celtics green here. They lost to the Clippers 129-119 last night. Now, Boston has now lost 4 of its last 5 games, and they're entering the All-Star break 2 games behind the Raptors in the East. Head coach Brad Stevens spoke out about it after the game. Okay, so, Doug, what in the world can the Celtics do at this point so that they are competitive again in the East? At one point, they were the favorites, but, I mean, they're looking kind of messed up.
Well, I mean, look, they have 12 new players from last season, and the team was constructed to have Gordon Hayward. And kind of like we all freaked out and have probably gone overboard about how good the Cavs look over the past 2 games is the same reaction we had to how good the Celtics looked early in the season, right? They played way above their level. Everything went in. They got a couple of calls, and Kyrie Irving was so happy to be out of Cleveland that he made some plays that are even above the level of Kyrie Irving. But look, you have 2 young wings who I thought looked like young wings yesterday. I mean, we've all been, I think, a little bit amazed at Jason Tatum and how quickly he's assimilated to the NBA level.
Yes,
but Jason
didn't see that development quickly.
But Jason Tatum was 4 of 13 from the floor. Jaylen Brown 4 of 12, and they look like children getting pushed around by maybe the best coaching job Doc Rivers has ever done is this year with the LA Clippers. I mean, think about the turnover they've had.
Yes.
And think about the thought that everybody thought DeAndre was going to get traded. He was, in fact, going to get traded. And yet they've kind of kept this thing together, even through some injuries. So, first, a little bit of credit to Doc Rivers. Second, I think even Brad Stevens knew that they weren't as good as the results would tell you in the first month and a half of the season. And this is closer to who they are without Gordon Hayward. When you're a team built around 2 all All-Stars, that being Kyrie Irving. I know Al Horford's been an All-Star, right? Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, and you don't have one of them, you're going to be
trouble.
And you don't have Marcus Smart, who's
Right.
your toughness.
Yeah.
So you lost your toughness from last year, you lost your toughest player from this year, and you don't have a complete rotation. You're playing younger players. This is what happens in the NBA. They're not as good as the early results would tell you.
And two of their frontline players being very, very young. So not only they don't have the bodies that they'll have in a couple years, but also at this point in the season, they're not rookies and everything, but they're still in the early stages of the career. Tatum is a rookie, Brown being in the second year. They're starting to hit that wall. Also, NBA teams are starting to play more out on them on the three-point line and won't let them shoot those no-look threes. So last night's game, though, let's talk about that. Brad Stevens, what he's got to be disappointed in, they got outscored by 20 points in the paint. So not only in last night's game, but what we've seen in the first 60 games is their lack of post offense has really hurt them. So late in games, they have no post offense. If Kyrie Irving isn't scoring late, because that's what they were doing. Yep. They played great defense for 3 quarters, and then in the fourth quarter, Kyrie would cook up a potion. Yes, and that's how they won a lot of these games. Now we have some correction. And Doug's not wrong by saying, you know something? They missed Gordon Hayward. People are like, well, he got hurt in the first game. So what? This is a team constructed to have his stability in the game. Him getting 22 to 23 points a game, getting 7 rebounds, 4 to 5 assists a game. That's what Gordon Hayward would be getting. So when you can't replace that, and also the Marcus Smart injury, you know, so they went through the tough month of January, the other teams, but Marcus Smart injury takes away their grit, takes away some of their defensive toughness. So now this is who the Celtics really, really are compared to the team that we saw the first 30 games.
So I hear you both telling me that they need to be very worried because certainly when you look at them versus the new look Cavs, as we're calling them, they're completely deep, right? So they don't have, as you point out, Chris Carter, this construction around these 1 or 2 only guys, and without one of the elements, they fall apart this way. So, Doug, given that, you know, this is where they are,
right.
You know, as you say, this is probably really what they should be looking like considering the factors. What, if anything, can they do to turn it around?
Well, they're going to get Marcus Smart back, and I think I think this is a good thing. You know, remember the first 2 games of the year, Kyrie didn't play well. They lost, I think, the first 2 games of the year. And it was like the best thing that could happen because if you trust Brad Stevens' system, what he's going to get you is what CeCe's talking about. The beauty to it is he creates kind of false movement so at the end of the shot clock, you have the center guarding the point guard, and your point guard's your best scorer. And early in the year, what was happening was Kyrie was like, look, I can take point guards. I can take 2 guards. It doesn't matter. And I think Brad was sitting over there going like, would you just trust me? The percentage of times in which you'll get a good shot are made exponentially higher if you will just allow the offense to work for you. I think he's had that same problem with Jaylen Brown, with Jason Tatum, where a little bit of success before maybe they were ready for it has allowed them to think, okay, I'm going to be a 3-point shooter. Okay, I'm going to go one-on-one. I'm going to break off of the system. It's allowed them to be a little bit softer defensively. You add Marcus Smart, that changes your makeup. Remember, they haven't had Marcus Morris the entire season. I think eventually they want to make him a bigger focal point into their key lineups. I think it's going to take time. And then potentially adding Gordon Hayward. It's the big, you know, Brad Stevens has said he doesn't expect him to play, but Gordon Hayward is walking, is shooting, does look like he's walking without a limp. I think there still is the possibility of seeing him, but you got to see him before the playoffs because you can't go from 0 of not playing, breaking your leg, to 100 and playing the playoffs. I do think they'll get better with Smart and with more time with Marcus Morris. And then the idea that Brad, I think, likes the fact they're not playing well so they can hit refresh during the break.
Yeah, if he did have a broken leg, we might see him in the playoffs. But he didn't. He had a total dislocation of the ankle, which right now, last week, our friend Chris Mannix saw him, and that ankle is still black and blue. So, yes, he's walking around. He's doing some stationary things, but I would be shocked. I would be as shocked when I saw that injury if I see him get on the court this season.
And do you think it would be irresponsible if they try to move too quickly?
I don't think he's going to be able to get on the court. I just think this is kind of the Celtics magic that they're sprinkling around to a young team. Oh, Gordon Hayward, he might come back and everything. No, Gordon Hayward is not.
So you're saying they're selling pipe dreams?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's more that it's kind of like when Derrick Rose was healthy with the Bulls, and people were like, why doesn't he play in the playoffs? I don't think people have a healthy respect for how the level of competition and how it steps up in the playoffs.
The intensity, yes.
Right? You can hide a guy for 10 minutes in an NBA regular season, end of season game. You're playing against a G League guy. You're playing against teams that are tanking, that are trying to lose. You can throw him out there 10 minutes, run up and down. He wouldn't be ready, likely, until the playoffs. And you can't just throw a guy who hasn't played all year that dislocated an ankle and put him on the court in the play. It's such a high level of competition, you just can't hide anybody.
All right, welcome back to First Things First. Sticking with the NBA, there's a new team on top in the West. The Warriors lost last night to the Blazers, while the Rockets, well, they beat the Kings. So Houston now leads the Western Conference by half a game heading into All-Star break. Cris Carter, now we know what the numbers say. Their record is better, but do the numbers tell the whole story? Are the Rockets a better team than Golden State?
I'm telling you that at the All-Star break, if you'd have told me Houston was going to have a better record and they were going to have the home court advantage, I'd be shocked about that. Are they a better team? No, I believe they are formidable, though. I believe that this will be contested. And not only by Houston, I just believe that whoever is in the 2 and the 3 seed, they're going to have a tougher trip to the finals than the number 1 seed. Now, we don't know who's going to be number 8 seed, so that first round matchup for the number 1 seed. But Houston, they have improved their team. Chris Paul, his ability to play with James Harden, I believe over a half a season has proven itself. But most of the things on their resume have to do with the postseason. James Harden disappearing in the postseason. Chris Paul being hurt in the postseason. So even on paper, if they have the best record, a lot of their questions, they have to be answered in the postseason. Golden State has proven at the end of the season, in the postseason, they can turn it up to a different gear. So, no, right now I give benefit of the doubt to the Warriors because they are the world champions.
Perfect example is, can you, outside of De'Aaron Fox, can you name a Sacramento Kings starter? And I like to think I know a lot about basketball, and I had to look. Like, I didn't know Jakar Sampson or Willie Cauley-Stein or Bogan Bogdanovic were 3 of the starters for the Kings. So I don't know if last night is a great gauge. You're looking at the overall record. And there's a lot of Toronto Raptors to what we see with the Rockets, right? But the Raptors, as you pointed out earlier, and accurately so, they've actually changed their offense. They're moving the ball a lot better. There's a lot of reason to buy into. There's a lot of reason to buy into the Houston Rockets. I love Chris Paul. He's tough. He plays defense. I think he's actually clutch, even though his record in the postseason would tell you otherwise.
Yes.
James Harden's incredible, and he wears you down because he gets to the free throw line. And I love how they use Clint Capella. But again, until I see it in the playoffs, I have history as my guide. And history has told me that Mike D'Antoni's teams don't guard. Talk to people in the NBA, and they'll say, James Harden still doesn't play any defense, and he still gets so many calls in the regular season, he's not going to get in the postseason. So they've done a nice job of trying to reformulate this thing. But if you ask yourself, match up the top 3 guys from the Golden State Warriors. You got Steph Curry, you got Kevin Durant, you got Klay Thompson. Can you match up those top 3 guys with the top 3 guys from the Houston Rockets? And the answer is no. Steph Curry has consistently dominated Chris Paul in one-on-one matchups going back to the Clipper days. He's abused him. Sure. He's the one guy that Chris Paul, because if you can bring hand checking back in, Chris Paul would maul him, would manhandle him. But because he can't touch him, he's really struggled to guard Steph Curry. And then you have the Draymond problem. And whoever the 5th player is for the Golden State Warriors, we talked a little bit about earlier, they need Iguodala to play better. I still think the Golden State Warriors are better, even if the Rockets are playing better basketball right now, because I have history and I have the individual matchups to point to.
Let me ask you both this real quick. History is great. They are proven in the postseason. I'm talking about Golden State, of course. Absolutely true. But as we said earlier in the show, Cris Carter and Doug, their record is almost as bad as it's ever been under Steve Kerr's leadership.
Sure.
So are you both sitting here today on this program still supremely confident in Golden State's ability to do what they have done previously in the postseason based off of what we've seen thus far this year?
Right. Well, one thing that I have to do, I have to give them benefit of the doubt. They've played 3 seasons. They've played over 100 games. So, and if I don't do that, I'm not being fair. I'm not being fair to NBA historians. I'm not being fair to what's played out in the NBA. So with them having the same record as Houston. Now, what I'm more concerned about is the bench. You talked about the top 3. Yes, Golden State has an advantage. But where Houston has gotten much better is in their bench play, in that second unit that's going to play a lot of minutes in the playoffs. So you got to give Golden State the benefit of the doubt. But also D'Antoni's system, it has improved, but will it prove out when the possessions become more valuable? And when you don't get up and down the court as much in the postseason, what wins out? Either the way the Warriors have played, and the Warriors, they're going to up their defense at the end of the season into the playoffs.
In basketball, as in all sports, you take on the identity of your coach. Yep. You take on the identity of your best player.
Yes.
And when your coach is an offensive-minded, offensive guru, offensive genius that has never really had a ton of time for defense, and he has to hire a Jeff Bezdelk and says, you handle the defense, it's still who the head coach is a reflection. That team is a reflection of his personality. And the same with this team. No matter how many other defensive pieces you put around James Harden, the best of the best learn to compete at the defensive end. That's how they win championships. And he still, if you watch him, you really pay attention. Don't give me these defensive ratings. He still hides. He still takes plays off. The identity of the Rockets is D'Antoni and Harden, and that identity is too offensive-minded to win when it really matters.
Back now to the Warriors. Kevin Durant, well, he had 50 points, but Golden State still lost to the Blazers last night. Now, it seems KD and company still haven't gotten over all the criticism they received when Steve Kerr let the players do the coaching earlier this week. KD says this, quote, everybody just loves to hate on the Warriors. Whatever we do, they don't want to just say they hate us. So they're going to make up excuses as to why they don't like us or why it was disrespectful. Who gives a blank? All right, Chris Carter, does Durant have a point here? Is this everybody just sipping on that haterade like Doug's over here doing?
No, everyone doesn't hate the Warriors. But let me tell you something, Kevin Durant. When you decided to go to Golden State, you had a lot of people start hating you and not hating the Warriors, but there's a dislike because it felt as if it was unfair. Like the competition was unbalanced. For those who want to be competitive, my good friend Stephen A. said he thought it was a chump move by Durant going there. Me, I would call myself a purist. I love the way they play basketball. I think that this is a collection of players that we will talk about for a long, long time. I think that we're in a window that's very, very special. No different than the window when Julius Erving was in the NBA. No different than when Michael Jordan took over the NBA. These are all different phases. The phase we're in now is the phase where the Warriors dominated in a phase where LeBron James was in his prime. Yeah. So I think that they are very, very special. I'm glad I'm not with the rest of the national media. But this underdog thing and everyone's against us thing, like, enough of that. All right, Golden State, like, enough with what you're talking about. We had Philadelphia. Yeah, they should have been the underdogs. They had a backup quarterback, but all these teams saying they don't get respect and they're the underdogs. No, like, let's you pump your brakes a little, KD.
It does feel a little bit like, you remember how LeBron struggled with wearing the black cap early in his run with the Miami Heat?
Yeah, right? Being the villain.
He didn't like being the villain.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Durant's struggling with this a little bit. Now, look, one of the reasons I think that
Kevin, give us a little bit of the makeup of Kevin Durant before he went to Golden State, like who he is as a person, off the court, on the court, like his personality.
Well, remember, he was in Oklahoma City, and he was a guy who everybody loved.
Just as happy as could be.
Happy
like
as can be.
Happy kid.
He was always seen as a gym rat, like the coolest guy in town. He owned a bar in Oklahoma City. Yeah. He bought 2 townhouses and combined the 2. Like he was all about Oklahoma City. Everybody loved him. Like everybody respects Russ, but Russ wasn't somebody that guys were drawn to. Everybody was drawn to Kevin Durant. His mom would sit courtside. His brother would sit
Great
courtside.
story.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. From nothing to something. His MVP speech.
Yep.
Giving
MVP,
to his mom, "You're the real MVP." Right.
Yeah.
All those things. He was beloved. And now all of a sudden, people start to take shots at you, and you're not used to it. You're like, hey, and then hey, I just won a championship. Hey, I just outplayed LeBron James, and you're still trying to cast negativity on us. So I think he's struggling, much like LeBron in his first year. He's struggling a little bit more delayed in his second year with the idea that people they're not giving him the credit that he believes that he might be due. I think the whole impetus behind the move from Oklahoma City to Golden State was when they matched up with the Warriors when they were up 3-1, every time he got the basketball, he had 2 guys on him. Andre Robertson or whoever else was on the floor for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're playing a zone and guarding him man-to-man.
Yeah, tilted his side of the court.
Right. So to him, he was like, look, I think I'm the best offensive player in the game, but I can't show it. Yeah. So if I go to a place to which there's just plenty of space and you can't help off of Steph or Clay or to a lesser extent Draymond Green, I can make you pay. I think that's what it was about. And I think that when he finally won a championship and proved beyond a reasonable doubt that if you don't think he's as good as LeBron James, that's fine. Nick obviously doesn't. I think right now he's surpassed him, at least offensively, and starting to get there defensively as well. But I respect what he showed the world on the world's biggest stage for basketball players. I don't think he feels that fans or that media members or maybe even some guys in the NBA feel the same. And I think that's what this battle's about. And I think that he's personalizing it, and I think he's bitter about it.
So I really like KD. I think he's like a fun, jovial kid almost.
Me too.
I mean, he's got a great energy, right? But here's where I think he's mistaken. I think his expectation, to your point, Doug, that the world is going to cheer you on and celebrate you making a decision that is in your best interest is misplaced of Kevin Durant. I think he's being naive to think it. I think I'm with you. I'm a purist as well. I think that you have to take your talents and cultivate them in the way that is in your professional and personal best interest. That is what he did with the move. Going to Golden State, he was right to do it. But is that in the best interest of Oklahoma City? Is that in the best interest of all the people that became, a part of the fabric, they thought? No, no. So, yes, they're upset. Yes, they demonize you. Yes, they feel like you betrayed, a commitment to their community. But that's not KD's problem. But to expect them to celebrate and cheer on from the sidelines, him deciding what's in his best interest, that he's going to end up sorely disappointed.
Yeah, he needs to get over it. And there's a sports maturity that comes with being in professional sports. You have to become a little more callous. Let's look at Steph Curry. I mean, he was the most adorable little cute thing going on.
Sure.
And then they lost. And then maybe his wife started getting a little backlash. People start talking about his product as far as Under Armour.
Sure.
But you don't hear Steph complaining because Steph, he's not a villain, but he's kind of gotten used to being famous. KD could take a page out of Steph's book.
Good point.
You don't hear Steph complaining about the game, but Steph, man, that adorable thing. I mean, that you don't see them showing the highlights of Steph before the game like they used to, with him doing all the dribbling, all the shooting drills and everything. No, Steph has kind of gotten used to who he is in the overall global scheme of basketball, and KD needs to give himself some credit. Bruh, you are arguably the first or second best player in the world. You're on the world champ. Like, it's not you against the world. And all of us don't hate you. You actually have some of us that are still admiring the great skill that you have.
Yeah, it's interesting because you go back to the Twitter thing, right, where he's trolling guys on Twitter on burner Twitter accounts, right? These are all symptoms.
Yeah.
The technical fouls are a symptom. The comment about people hating him are a symptom. And the problem is, as kind of I think we've all identified, he's struggling with being the villain, not being beloved. Not, it's like I'm sure he's probably sitting there going, if I had stayed in Oklahoma City and not won a title, people would actually like me more than they like me now.
It would have made everybody else happy,
right?
but he wouldn't have maximized
happy.
his ability.
Right, whereas I see it as a sacrifice of ego. I'm like, look at, you mentioned Steph Curry. Imagine you won 2 MVPs, you won a title, and you're like, hey, man, you come be the better player on my team because it helps us collectively be better. Like, that's a sacrifice of ego that you don't see in any business, let alone in sports. But they've done it, and they haven't been celebrated for it. In fact, they've been vilified for it.
Absolutely.
But Steph handles it better than KD, and KD's gone through, this is a good 8 to 10 months of these symptoms popping out, and at some point, it's got to be addressed. You got to get over it.
And I actually think this was best for his career. This was the best move for his career.
No question, but this is it's like the rule when you're on a date. Don't talk about your ex-girlfriend. Stop talking about your ex-girlfriend, your ex-wife.
Sure.
He keeps talking about it. They don't like us. There's all Oklahoma City. Like, everybody else is like, look, dude, if you want to start getting over that girl, stop talking about that girl.
Also, but sometimes you got to talk about her just to laugh, though.
Look at you. But also to your dating analogy, though, you are a mess. You know what it is, too? Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Y'all are guys. Y'all seem cool. Men don't want to be the bad guy, right? And KD's got to get over that. It's okay to be the bad guy. And to the Steph Curry comparison, guess what? He comes from Del Curry, who understands intimately what it is to be that local hometown hero and fall off the pedestal. So he's just fine. KD, it's a maturity thing, just as you point out. He'll get over it.
So you're the dumper. You don't allow yourself to be the dumpy.
Well, it's not allowing as much as just circumstantial, Doug.
Okay.
All right.
That's just the way things
Well,
work out.
He did buy you a nice
one
dinner
day
last
after
night, so
Valentine's Day. Okay, a lot of breakups happen around this time.
Oh, no. We're going to keep it positive.
You're good?
Here. We're all good.
Okay, you're
all
good.
Hey everybody, Nick Wright here, and thank you so much for listening to the First Things First podcast. But I wanted to tell you about another podcast at Fox Sports that we are so excited about, and that is Alexi Lalas's State of the Union podcast. That's right, U.S. soccer legend Alexi Lalas will be partnering up with Fox soccer guru and researcher extraordinaire David Moss to review the top storylines in soccer across the globe. Each week, Alexi will give his State of the Union on American soccer as it rebuilds for the future. Subscribe and listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Now back to the show.
Carson Wentz, we know he was the MVP favorite before injuring his knee in Week 14. The second-year QB tore both his ACL and LCL while diving for the end zone. But apparently he's not changing the way he plans to play the game. Take a listen.
I definitely won't change, so to speak. I think that's what's, made me successful this last season and really my whole career. I think it's just something that I've been learning since I got into the league. It's just constantly learning how to protect myself, where to take those chances, where to not. It's just kind of part of the game.
Okay, Cris Carter, I understand the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I get that. But obviously, some very devastating season-ending injuries he suffered as a result of that style of play. Should he change it?
No, he shouldn't change his play, because one thing about Carson Wentz, and if you look at and one of your favorite athletes, if you go back to the combine and you look at the measurables between Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, and Andrew Luck, you'd be shocked like how athletic Andrew Luck and Carson Wentz are. Now, Andrew Luck, we know he suffered through a lot of injuries. Cam has been relatively healthy. But as far as an athlete, what I'm trying to point out is he is a special, special athlete. Now, Aaron Rodgers, not the same dimensions, not the same explosiveness, but a very good athlete. One of the things that makes Aaron so good is his ability to maintain his quarterback posture in the pocket and move to his right and to his left. It's not his overall running ability, because Aaron has figured out, I'm only going to hurt him a few times running it, but the ability to buy time, which I believe that Carson, as he gets older, he'll use the athleticism not necessarily to gain yardage, but to buy time in the pocket, because that's what the great athletes who convert to pocket passers, and Carson Wentz is a pocket passer who happens to be a tremendous athlete.
Look, he is a great athlete, and for whatever reason, we don't regard him as such. Maybe because he's so tall, because he's so big, maybe because he's white. I don't know.
Well, that has a lot to do with it. But when you look at the pure numbers with him and Andrew Luck, they have the same measurables as Cam Newton.
No question. But look, he's third most in design quarterback runs, fifth most in scrambles. And so I think we might be arguing semantics here. He doesn't necessarily need to change, but he needs to evolve. Every rule, they have changed offensive football to protect the quarterback in the pocket and to promote passing and scoring, right? They can't touch wide receivers after 5 yards down the line, after 5 yards. Why? Because we want you to throw the ball. Fans, the same reason they're going to change the catch rule, because we want more catches, we want more offense, we want more points, and we want more healthy quarterbacks. It's not good for business when we have backup quarterbacks in the game. And what they've told Cam Newton, they're going to tell Carson Wentz, which is, hey, once you leave that pocket, you're on your own, dude. In the pocket, it's like the Anchorman fight. Nothing above the neck, nothing below the knee, right? We can protect you. And I think the machismo that he's expressing some, and there's a balance to how he said it, and he does know he needs to evolve. But the idea of I'm not going to change who I am, that's like classic young guy talk, right? I bought rims on a car that were worth more than the car. That's young guy talk, right? That's a bad tattoo in college over a girl that you're going to break up with 2 months later.
You did that talk?
I have no tattoos.
Okay.
But I do know plenty of dudes that had lines in the side of their head or got tattoos of a girl's name or had rims or had all of the above. And then, you get to be in your 30 and like, what was I doing? Carson Wentz only needs to look at Eli Manning. Eli Manning, he could race a dead body and lose. Okay. But Eli Manning, up until this year when the Giants pulled the plug, Eli Manning had the second longest consecutive games played streak. Why? Because we can protect you in the pocket, you get rid of the ball quicker, and he needs to learn, like Aaron Rodgers, you can be athletic, but be athletic as much as you can between those tackles.
And also there's a leadership component. As the face of that franchise, you got to stay healthy. You cannot rely on what happened this year as far as the backup quarterback.
Yes.
You can believe that their general manager, their head coach, the owner, everyone is going to. Carson, yes, you might believe that in your own mind, but he's got to be smarter about it because the responsibility as the face of a franchise, it's ability, but it's availability. How often, because that will determine how good he's going to be. So I believe that he'll be better in the pocket, but he's a phenomenal athlete. He's a strong guy, and it's really hard to tell him, no, we don't want you scrambling anymore.
I really like that point, Cris Carter, of responsibility. I think as the franchise quarterback and the face of the team, there's a responsibility to safeguard yourself to the extent you can against that type of season-ending injury. And the question I have, though, Doug, you said, well, we know he's going to have to evolve. But do you think Carson Wentz is really consciously thinking, I'm going to have to sometimes slide, I'm going to have to sometimes run out of bounds more so than he's done in the past?
I think if you listen to the entirety of the quote, because so oftentimes we're just as guilty of this as any show is, right? We react to the I'm not going to change who I am type thing.
No, you put it in context.
But then when he went on, he was like, you know, I got to learn to be smarter about it. I have to understand. And we brought up Cam Newton. You're right. He is a phenomenal athlete. But the idea that you can run is, what's the Chris Rock line? You can drive a car with your feet, but that doesn't make it a good idea.
Yes.
Right? He can run. He can run for the first down. That doesn't make it a good idea. You need to make yourself as available as often as possible if you want to live up to the lofty potential that you showed us. He was going to be the MVP of the NFL. And yes, they won a title without him, but the chances that happens again are slim.
But
slim.
Yeah, but the difference, though, Doug, and you know I love Cam Newton, but Cam is not the pocket passer that Carson Wentz is, and so therefore I think I don't believe.
You're right. But
so I think he runs out of necessity more so than I don't think he has the same option.
Right. You're right. But how often have you heard, you know, in your time covering and watching the Carolina Panthers, hey, Cam, just because you can run over a dude doesn't mean you shouldn't slide, right?
Oh, true.
RG3's career, there's a lot of reasons his came to an end, but one, he would not slide. Like, again, you can run.
Is that just defiance? Let me ask you guys, you both play, especially on the field. Is that defiance? Is that stubbornness? What's that about?
No, I wouldn't say Cam where he is, because I've been watching Cam since his junior year in Atlanta playing quarterback. And Cam has been the biggest and the most athletic guy on the field. Like when you you've been to Carolina game.
Absolutely.
I mean,
he's a gigantic.
I mean, it's it's a lot of big men that play in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's like
he blocks out the side.
It's like, good Lord, look at this guy. I mean, 6'5", 250. It's really, really hard. And Cam is so aggressive that sometimes you can't get that frame down to a baseball slide this way when you're thinking about going head first, when they're going to give you the yardage like a normal player. So I believe it's more of a predicament that you get into. Michael Vick, he talks to us all the time about the struggle to slide, even though you're very, very athletic.
He's a much smaller guy.
Yeah, this is what we wish they had, Russell Wilson. And because of his baseball background, man, he is a magician.
Yeah, he's like the Emmitt Smith of quarterback. Remember how Emmitt Smith never seemed to take a clear shot?
Yes.
Right? Same thing with Russell. Russell scrambles around back there, never takes a clear shot. Look, I mean, I think, though, that he's working with Doug Peterson and whoever else they decide to be alongside that offensive staff. And Doug Peterson can simply say, like, look, Brett Favre, tough as they come. I was his backup forever in Green Bay. But Brett Favre wasn't going to go around scrambling out of the pocket because you can get killed. Yeah. And, we're more likely to succeed when you're healthy. You're more likely to be healthy if you stay in that pocket.
Yes.
It sounds great in front of men. It sounds great on the radio to say, I'm still going to have the same type of bravado and leadership and try and get every play and rah. But the reality of it is the NFL is telling you, based upon their rules, we can protect you in that pocket. We can't protect you out of that pocket. Stay in there as long as possible.
Let me tell you what he did learn from. He might not learn from the hit, but he did learn from them 3 games in the regular season that he had to sit out and Nick Foles started. And I can guarantee you that he learned from them 3 playoff games and the last one ending in Minnesota where they were dropping confetti.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1 starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.